Joining me today is a very special guest, Michael Rodriguez. So Michael, for those who don't know you, can you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Well, as you said, my name is Michael Rodriguez, and I'm a painter, I'm an artist, and I'm a colleague of yours at LaGuardia Community College, and I teach studio art in the humanities department, but I must say my primary identity is that of a studio artist, so that's, yeah.
Okay, very good.
That's my story.
That's your story. So I know that your work has been labeled or associated with what's called abstract expressionism.
Yeah, well, we're not literally speaking, but yeah, I come out of an abstract tradition, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
So you wouldn't identify as an abstract expressionist?
No.
Okay. So how would you characterize your art?
My work, I'm interested in like the idea of abstraction, but also the idea of a picture of something, or representation, or process. Process in terms of how I make the work, and maybe also process being pictured, or process being alluded to, maybe processes in the natural world, let's say, or things like that. So it's not abstract in a purely gestural way, or in a way that, say Pollock would talk about the subconscious mind, or I think he even say the unconscious.
Right.
I never liked that idea. But no, I don't work in the kind of what we think of as like the New York school of abstract expressionism.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I have a much more kind of cooler approach, a much more kind of distanced approach, and so it's
Your work is characterized that way online, so it's interesting.
Oh, really? Yeah.
He said you're best known for abstract expressionism.
Oh, really? I don't know where that was, but yeah. I mean, it's definitely like kind of, because my work is also very much influenced by color field painting,
yes,
or even pop art in the sense of and color choices, and popular culture in a lot of ways. But I do like the open-ended quality of abstraction.
Yeah. So
ultimately, they're abstractions. They're not illustrations in any way, or they don't directly allude to any kind of specific process or anything like that.
So when you, cause that's something I want. So just to let's see if this can work right here. So
Sure.
Let's start with this one. So when we're looking at a piece of your work like this one right here,
right.
This isn't a depiction of any particular scene. You don't have anything in mind when you make these sorts of things?
No, I usually have a kind of color scheme in mind, and I definitely have a process in mind in terms of repetition of certain sequences, let's say. But it's primarily a kind of intuitive process, so that results in this kind of, I like this notion of like organic geometry, let's say. Or, this one has almost a snowflake quality about it. But, I always kind of negate that through using different types of materials, or, browns. You're not going to find a lot of brown snowflakes, right? So I kind of, I'm not...
Living in the city, you find a few.
Yeah, that's true, right. But it's primarily a kind of intuitive process that is kind of rooted in the act of making them and making decisions spontaneously, or but it's very kind of open-ended.
They're very geometric and regular, though. So there's no. How do you divide up the canvas, and or is it just is there some pre-thought out stuff that you?
Yeah, I don't.
You said it's very intuitive, so I'm wondering like how much you think of it beforehand.
Yeah, I definitely kind of work in a flat. Well, there's two different things going on. A lot of ways they're kind of very flat, kind of operating on the picture plane, and maybe you can imagine the way dividing the rectangle up into quadrants, or the square into quadrants. So there's definitely a kind of formal, flat, geometric abstraction going on. But then there's also areas of the painting where there's like a real illusion of depth.
Right.
So you have these two different things happening. This very flat surface, formal quality of the painting, but then also other areas that have this real illusion of space and depth. So there's a kind of tension there between two different things going on. Some things are sitting flat on the surface, and some things are really, while it's always flat on the surface, it does have this illusion of space and depth. So I try to create this almost like a a tension between these two different ways of working.
Interesting.
Kind of a flat geometric abstraction, but then also an illusion of space and depth.
And how those two kind of compete for the viewer's attention.
Yeah, kind of compete and kind of make, kind of like multiple reference points. So if you're, if you look at a lot of painting, a lot of art, you might recognize, oh, there's this kind of like color field quality, this quality of geometric abstraction, but then there's also this kind of pictorial quality, and there's this illusion of orbs floating in space that is countered by these very flat areas that are flopped, very much on the surface. So, yeah, I like that kind of surface tension, I guess you could call it.
So how did you discover this, the cells or the orbs that is here? I guess your primary motive? How did you come by that?
Yeah, well, like a lot of things just through working. So I was using different materials, and I've always played with ways of applying the paint.
Mm-hmm.
I've poured it out, I've sprayed it on, I've scraped it on, scraped it off, I've painted on glass, I've painted on metal, I've squeezed paint out of cake icing decorators, guns. I've used all kinds of things, because I've always been interested in kind of like non-painterly approaches to painting, outside of like a brush and, kind of traditional ways of applying paint. I've always tried to have this kind of tool being the kind of mediator between me and the canvas, something between my hand and the canvas. So anyway, I was using these sponges, these painting sponges, and I just twirled it almost like a compass, and it made this kind of really nice chord feel, which was very much a very simple circular form, but also alluded to like a bubble or an atom or a molecule. And then I also thought of it as different, kind of like you think about earlier geometric abstraction was always based on kind of right angle geometry and this was more like, I liked the circular form as a means of creating geometry. But it was just kind of like, oh, look at that looks good. And I just kept running with it.
What
and I
year
found it
was
very
that?
satisfying to repeat that thing, repeat that motion very mechanically over and over and over and over and over.
What year was that?
That would have been like mid-90s, early 90s,
Okay.
something like that. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
so it's been a while.
So it was really just through a process of experimenting and sort of accidentally hitting on something.
Yeah, I think that's the way most artists tend to stumble on things through the process of working, right?
Right.
I'm sure it's like when you're writing, you don't, know how it ends, but as you're writing, ideas unfold,
Yeah.
I would think. So as you're working, you try things out, and some things work, some things don't. Some things happen by accident.
But so you must have really liked it because how many of these kinds of pieces have you done at this point? Hundreds?
Yeah, it'd have to be hundreds. Yeah, between works on paper and canvases.
Yeah.
It's
It
become
must have really spoke to you or something. Something about it must draw you in a really profound way.
I liked all the multiple readings.
Yeah.
It just had all these different multiple readings, and it could be so many different things. But in the end, it was this kind of circular form. And then, I tend to resist making direct analogies, but when you think about, the way people talk about the nature of the universe and this kind of frothiness, right? This kind of ether, or even something, it just seemed like there was a lot of connotations it made, and I was comfortable with most of them, even the ones I'm not comfortable with, it's fine. And there's also something, I like this tension between something that's almost superficial and trite, like a bubble, right? Like bubble, making paintings and bubbles can be very, like my 10-year-old daughter. But I like this tension between something that can be rather superficial, but then also can be kind of intense formally or has all these implications of other things. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So, because I know when I first saw your pieces, I thought they were amazing, but I didn't really understand how you drew such perfect bubbles.
Right.
So now it seems like there's you do it one motion and that's the bubble.
Yeah, and they're not perfect either.
No, you're right. When you look at them closely, they're not.
Just like in nature, right? You have these perturbations or things don't always come out as they're supposed to, right? So I'm not interested in perfection. Otherwise, I would just go on a computer and just clone everything. So
Right.
I'm interested in like mistakes, or not even mistakes, but irregularities, imperfections, you know, I mean, in that sense, there is my hand involved because, you know, if I wanted to, I could just use stencils and put it on a computer, and, you know, so I'm not interested, and also too, like, again, I could make like 10 billion circular forms, right? I mean, it's like, you know, so I'm not interested in trying to replicate, you know, any kind of like scientific illustration, or,
Right.
you know, I mean, they're definitely like hemmed in by painting. They're kind of hemmed in by that, and they're hemmed in by abstraction, and so I like that connotation. I'm definitely committed to like the open-ended quality of abstraction, and the viewer kind of getting out what they bring to it, no matter whether the viewer is a layperson, let's say, or, you know, an art critic or theoretician. You know, they're going to get something different out of it.
Yeah, that's very true.
And I like that.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask next. Actually, was who are you painting for? Is this for the artist primarily, or for?
Well, ultimately for myself, right? I mean, I'm the first person that needs to be satisfied, because I mean, ultimately the painting, it really does come out of desire, like a real strong desire to manifest this image in a way that is satisfying to me, that makes sense, and it's like, it's definitely rooted in desire. And I like this idea of, I mean, I think a lot of people, most people kind of crave this experience of art, and I want to give that experience, but I don't want to give it in a way that is, you know, not, I mean, I'm interested in like creating sophisticated works. Now, that can mean a lot of things these days, right? I mean, you could look at the most scrawled, scratched, almost unskilled type work that is considered very sophisticated in many ways. But I mean, I'm interested in like the working on many levels, you know? I mean, some people, like I said, get one thing out of it and another audience gets another thing out of it. So, I mean, I don't really think about my audience so much. I mean, like, you know, the audience and other artists in the art world is going to see it one way, but I would like to. I'm not interested in like alienating the lay person. Although that doesn't mean that, you know, look, people who have no interest in art, that's fine. I mean, I'm not looking to convert anybody,
But it seems like, I guess the reason why I was asking the question is because it seems like some art, you have to have gone to art school to appreciate it. I mean, not to look at it and view it, but I mean to understand that it's part of a conversation.
Right.
It's responding to like what people did in the last 30 years, so that, you know, the way I think it maybe Impressionism or Expressionism in general kind of started was as a reaction to realism and those sort of things. So then you get to the, you know, people like Duchamp and those guys. And so those, to understand where they're coming from, you have to understand the kind of, what was going on in the art world. So do you view your work in that kind of context, or is that not something you think about?
No, it definitely, it comes out of that context for sure. But, you know, you gotta understand, there's, you know, artists who have no interest in aesthetic judgments or no interest in beauty or engaging anything like the sublime. And there's art that's all about like, institutional critique, art about language, you know, art that's all strictly about theory, you know, even political and social construct, and postmodernist art. And, you know, there's a lot of art that has absolutely nothing to do with any kind of visual satisfying pleasure. It's strictly rooted in theory, ideas. I mean, Duchamp had no interest in any kind of aesthetic choices or notions of beauty. I mean, he was clearly trying to shock the bourgeois class. You know?
It worked.
And it worked, and, you know, his influence has been tremendous. I mean, but he was also, I mean, he was a really, really great artist who did some visually compelling things, especially his last great work that's at the Philadelphia Museum. I mean, it's a totally surreal, bizarre, psychosexual piece of art.
Wow.
I'm forgetting the title of it right now. My French is bad. But I mean, you know, if you were to show that work and say, oh, some, you know, young grad student did this piece and it's brilliant, you would say, oh yeah, it's great. But it was kind of, so, yeah, I mean, Duchamp was, and also Duchamp, I don't want to start talking about Duchamp too much, but the way he introduced, like, you know, sexual identity, gender identity, language, I mean, he introduced all these ideas into art that are still really with us. I mean, you know, he had, you know, his alter ego Rose Salavi as a woman, of course Salavi in French, you know, Salavi. Yeah, so I mean and you know, gender fluidity and introducing language and puns into art. I mean, he was really brilliant that way.
So you think Duchamp's still very much an influence on the art of today?
Absolutely. I mean, you can't even. It would be impossible to extract his influence from a lot of art today.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
So your own influence, I know that you say you're influenced by Andy Warhol.
Yeah.
You're influenced by Adolf Reinhardt.
Ad Reinhardt.
Yeah. Ad Reinhardt, exactly, and Jackson Pollock. I mean, those I think are the three that you cited as your
not so much Pollock. I mean, obviously Pollock looms large for most painters, but certainly Ad Reinhardt for his matter-of-fact approach, just titling things.
He was a tricky guy, man.
Yeah, I mean, he
studied philosophy.
Yeah, he was heavy into philosophy, and he was heavy into politics, but that had a separate way of manifesting itself through his political cartoons, not in his artwork. And you know, he never took the bait that a lot of abstract expressionists took. So you know, he would tease.
What bait?
Well, like he would, you know, he never titled his things like Robert Motherwell, Elegy to the Spanish Republic. You know, like you look at this big gestural abstract thing that he created in the Hamptons, and I would ask him, what does this have to do with the Spanish Revolution? Well, absolutely nothing.
No, exactly.
I mean, and so it's a little pretentious, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's a little like, you know, and so I liked his matter-of-factness. He would title it Blue and Red, or, you know, Green Number 1. They were very literal, but they were really physically, visually seductive. I mean, they were real. I mean, the surface was done with great care, and they were really visual. They were meant to be looked at, which sounds obvious, but in person.
Yeah, but he was also known for like art for art's sake.
Right.
Not, you know, I don't know much about him. Obviously, you're the expert, but from what I read, he wanted to get away from images altogether and just have the art speak for itself.
That's right.
Which sounds a bit weird when you notice that a lot of his works are like monochrome. I mean, black on black, different shades of black and that sort of stuff.
Right.
So it's hard to see an influence like that on your work. So it must be more philosophically, or his approach, or do you think his actual aesthetic, or what was it that you think is influencing your work?
I guess his matter-of-factness about it, you know, like part of the reason I don't title my things, you know, Superstring Theory number 2.
That's a good title, actually.
You know, I mean, like, I'm not interested in, like, titling them, like, you know, Algorithm Blue or whatever the hell you want to call it. So I'd like to, and also his surfaces. Yeah. This is physical surfaces I'm really drawn to. They're very matte, almost like velvet, and I do something very similar in my work. And even, you know, like, all of the things I do in my paintings, I can easily show you how to do. So I'm not really trying to be a virtuoso in that sense. I'm not trying to, like, you know, demonstrate, you know, this incredible painting skill as much as I am in kind of coming to this image through a kind of mediated, almost neutral way. Knowing that, of course, it's an intuitive process, that's what I bring to it. Color decisions. I mean, there's always this like decision-making process, which is pretty obvious on the surface of the canvas, right? So, you know, Reinhardt was a big influence as far as that goes. And his idea of like a timeless art, you know, like you know, all, you know, not that all art is the same, but like, you know, a work of art has a kind of timelessness about it, and you could juxtapose works of art from any time period, and it would make sense. So that part was pretty influential too.
Interesting.
But he would never hang his hat anywhere. You know, and he was a little bit of a, you know, he was a little tongue-in-cheek too. Like he realized that he was kind of like almost presenting a kind of impossibility.
I mean, he did like cartoons by the end. Right?
A lot of cartoons.
Yeah.
Well, he would do them for this magazine called PM Magazine, which I believe is kind of like a leftist journal. So he did a lot of, and he did them all about, you know, the ones that were most popular were like, you know, how to look at cubism, how to look at abstract art, you know. So he was
still
really
art.
He was a major proponent. Well, he did some political work too, but he was a major proponent of abstraction. And he would say that he was like the first artist who began as an abstract artist and ended as an abstract artist. In other words, you know, most artists in the 20th century, like say Mondrian, you can almost see the cubism creeping in.
Yeah.
These landscapes that he did, they would become more and more geometric, and you could almost track a Mondrian from like early landscape to his later compositions with primary colors and just simple geometry. But Reinhardt was always an abstract painter from day one.
Right.
So he would make that claim. But I just found him to be a very interesting figure, and you know, he was really great. I only have one lecture of his on tape, and it's really, I listened to it too many times.
Wow.
But,
from where?
It was recorded at the Skowhegan School of Painting and Sculpture.
Okay.
So I bootlegged it, I think. I don't think I'm the first one. It's property of Skowhegan School of Painting and Sculpture. But I did.
Disclaimer.
Yeah, I did bootleg a copy of it.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
And so what about Andy Warhol? You say you're influenced by him as well, which seems a weird juxtaposition. Pop art and from my understanding, I guess pop art was supposed to be a reaction to abstractionism in some sense.
Yeah, it was pretty much like it was like as cool and as calculated. As opposed to say like a de Kooning or Pollock or, you know, where's all this like blood and guts and,
well, de Kooning,
you know, they were so like, you know, anti-bourgeois and so interested in like, you know, and Warhol openly embraced, I mean, like, you know, in the abstract expressionist, you know, the idea of like selling out was really big or not selling out.
Yeah.
And, you know, and Andy Warhol has openly embraced pop culture and his love for celebrity and his desire for fame
and soup,
desire for money and soup, and you know, and he openly embraced those things in a very pretty intense way, in a radical way too, a very radical way.
So how does that influence you? I mean, what influence on your work has that had?
I don't think there's a direct correlation aesthetically. Again, other than maybe introducing elements of the mechanical, the way he silk screened, and the way he moved his hand. There's a little bit of element of that in my work, and it may be some of the colors being related to pop imagery, perhaps. But yeah, no, and also just as a kind of, I don't know, he was an artist with, I think, a lot of personal integrity. In other words, he was very courageous in just being who he was, in terms of being a gay man and surrounding himself with people who were transgender and openly embracing further communities that were really marginalized and kind of putting them in the forefront long before it was really something that was being done. You know, and also he was a very intense artist. I mean, you know, those early car crash paintings, the electric chairs, those are pretty powerful paintings. You know, and you know, the people he often painted, you know, you think about Jackie O and Marilyn Monroe, Liz Taylor, there's something tragic in those figures.
Yes.
You know, so he just had an incredible visual panache. He just kind of knew, you know, what to do and how to do it in a very, pretty powerful way. And the work holds up.
Yeah. No, it's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like Warhol gets a bad rap kind of in the outside the art world because people focus only on the soup cans, the Maryland.
Yeah, and also so many artists today, they think that because they're, you know, selling out or because they're so interested in like their commercial position that they're being Andy Warhol, and they forget what a radical artist he was. Those early films, his you know, the work he did, the screenshots where he just, you know, would put people on camera. I mean, you know, his work, you know, was such a precursor to so many things. So his work was really challenging in its time. And, you know, so a lot of artists these days, like, oh, they're pop artists and they're selling all this work and they think they're Andy Warhol, but I don't think they are getting how radical that work was, even that early, especially the earlier work.
Interesting.
You know, there's nothing radical about doing pop art. Like all these street artists and, you know, they're just doing like, you know, hashed over pop graphics over and over. So his influence is like so huge. I mean, he's another one, like, you really can't remove him from the culture.
Yeah.
You know, and once you're hip to it, you see it everywhere.
And he really was kind of, I mean, obviously everyone knows, but he was really big in creating a scene. Underground rehearsing in studios. And pretty cool to keep bringing people together and focus on art.
Yeah, in kind of a both passive way and also in a very assertive way. So he was both very passive and assertive kind of simultaneously. And you know, those early soup can paintings, you gotta remember, he painted all those by hand. That was before he was doing silk
That was
screen.
before, right?
So you really got to want to do that.
Yeah, exactly.
That painting, I love the painting it's a painting of a pepper pot flavor soup. I don't know what the hell flavor that is, but, and the label's worn off.
Uh-huh.
And you can really see some real painting skill in the way he painted the metal, the painting label. I mean, he was a really skilled draftsperson. He drew beautifully. But you have to really want to do that.
Yeah,
So it wasn't like a cynical, like,
exactly.
laughing all the way to the bank and
Right.
people are making these things for me. And, it wasn't approached in that way, I don't think. I think it was done in a very earnest, sincere way. And, and his mother did give him Campbell soup every day. He really, it wasn't like something he just made up. I think it had a real connection to him.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's interesting. That's a good point. Yeah, that's.
It was a real connection to him.
Exactly.
And like I said, those paintings were painted by hand, and those sit down and do one. It's going to take you a long time.
Exactly.
So it's not something, But anyway, he was pretty brilliant, and he's one of those artists that manages to be very popular outside of the art world, but also still really admired by other artists.
Yeah, that's a hard achievement.
It's a really hard achievement.
Difficult.
The Beatles could do it.
Yeah, exactly.
It's very hard. It's really hard to do. He was able to do that.
So what? Can I ask you what you think about the contemporary art world? Is it still thriving? Like, what's going on?
Well, it's definitely thriving because the art world is just a reflection of the world in general, right? So you have it's driven by massive amounts of corporate money.
Yeah.
It's driven by massive amounts of people who have lots of money to spend on art. So there's that part of it, right? There's the kind of the world of auctions and the blue chip galleries, and not just it goes beyond the commodification of art. It goes to the point where you have like kind of market indexes, right? It's seen as an investment. And it's seen as an investment in a real, literal way, not just, buying something and hoping it becomes worth a lot of money. It's like buying it and storing it and flipping it, and it's perfectly mirrors the rest of the economy.
Right.
So the art world is always mirrored. It's not separate from the culture at large. But I would say the positive about the art world today is that kind of everything goes.
Uh-huh.
Everything
old is new again.
Yeah, figurative, really, there's a lot of really great figurative art happening right now. Some of the most interesting artists working in a figurative tradition, but there's still a lot of really interesting abstraction happening. And artists dealing with, identity politics are still, working, doing some interesting work. There's a lot of this, it's just kind of like almost everything goes. And it seems like trends come and go almost faster. So, as opposed to, pop kind of ruled the day for a long time. Kind of conceptual art came along, and other, minimalism and post-minimalism and all these movements. But now it just seems like it's just kind of everything is happening kind of simultaneously.
Uh-huh.
And I think it's important for artists to just do what they do, and if what they're doing is not in favor now, it'll be in favor 10 years from now.
That's a good point.
You know what I mean? You just gotta kind of
stick with
what you do, and you can't be chasing. But certainly, I would say right now there's a kind of it's coming out of like almost a self-taught tradition, but the artists who are making it are pretty sophisticated and clever about placing it in the art world. So there's a lot of work that is kind of anti-fabrication. It's using very scrappy materials. It's very done in almost a kind of nonchalant way, which it's and then there's work that, like I said, there's a lot of real interesting figurative work happening right now.
So do you think that there are artists that are active now who have the kind of impact that people like Reinhardt and Warhol and Duchamp had, or is that level of impact possibility gone?
I think so, but it's hard to really see in your own time,
Uh-huh.
right? Certainly we know there's certain artists that are incredibly, so, someone like Takashi Murakami is hugely successful, hugely popular.
Right.
Considers himself definitely a child of Andy Warhol. Whether or not in 50 years anybody gives a darn about Takashi Murakami, I couldn't tell you.
Yeah.
Someone like Jeff Koons, who, I would say at one point was making some of the most radical sculpture made out there. Again, in a kind of Duchampian Warhol tradition. Now he's so perfectly mirrors his corporate collector base has become kind of like, corporate baubles.
Yeah.
I mean, some of them are like really, really terrible. And I love those early. I mean, I love early Jeff Koons. I mean, some of the Jeff Koons works were like, just. So I think those early works of his will be important 100 years from now. But how his later work is viewed, I don't know. So I'm not gonna sit here and name the artists that I think are going to be.
And can't fact check you in 20 years.
Yeah, but I mean, there's certain figures. I mean, I hesitate, but there's certain figures. I think Cindy Sherman's place is pretty firm in history. In my opinion, probably Richard Prince. Those some of those picture generation artists are. I think they'll still be considered really important a long time from now. But who knows? Who knows?
It's difficult to say. Yeah, it's always hard to judge in your own time what is going to make a mark or what happened.
And the art will become so tightly wound. There's not so much art about art and art about dealers even.
Exactly.
It's like it's.
What was the big craze about outsider art? That was kind of a trend for a while.
I don't know if it's a trend. I mean, I think folk art, outside art, whatever you call it, has definitely established itself. And I think, look, all artists recognize great art, no matter where it comes from. But I think the outsider art world, I think it's very popular for one reason because I think people trust the motivations of the artist.
Yes.
They don't always trust the motivations of, some young hotshot grad school artist.
Right.
They don't trust the motivations of, when you walk to a gallery and you see something that is completely alienating to you, and you see a price tag on it in six figures.
Yeah.
It's like, it's like. But they trust the motivations of self-taught artists, outsider artists, and it's usually, Martin Ramirez. So there's a lot of great outsider artists. So I don't think artists, and those. I mean, I think of the Metropolitan Museum of Art right now. There's a collection of African American outsider artists, and that's probably a first for the Metropolitan Museum to have. I think it's somebody's collection. Sorry, I don't remember the name of the show, but. There's a lot of great work being. I mean, the American Folk Art Museum is some of the best shows in the city consistently.
Wow.
I mean, consistently they do some of the best shows in the city. So yeah, I think the outsider art thing is it's not going anywhere. But it's like I said, people trust the motivations of those artists. I think more so than contemporary.
The motivations in the sense of they're making art for the right reason.
Yeah, they're doing it because they really need to do it, or of course we love the obsessed, crazy artists. They're obsessed. They can't help it, or but there's something to that. I mean, there's a real thing about that. So, someone like Henry Darger, who made these incredible, bizarre narrative works. I mean, those are really intense. Those are great. Those are good on England.
I haven't seen those.
Yeah, you should look it up. I mean, it's pretty interesting.
I'll put a
they're pretty good. I mean, they're really amazing. And there's a photographer I like very much called Ronald Morton Bartlett, who would make these dolls of little kids and then photograph them, and they're like super hyper real, but very sweet and endearing, but also kind of creepy.
Yeah.
And it was kind of a little bit of precursor to some of the artists who were photographing. They would set up props and photograph them, and he did it really, really. But he would make these dolls, sometimes to scale, often not quite to scale, and photograph them. He was just doing this stuff on his own in his house. I mean, he wasn't doing them for his show coming out.
Right.
They're really intense.
Sounds kind of creepy.
Yeah, they're a little creepy, but they're beautiful. But they're like, wow, what was the motivations of this guy? I think Martin Bartlett.
Martin Bartlett. Okay, I'll look into it.
Yeah,
I'll put a link to that.
Yeah, they're really good.
So, do you think that there's anything undiscovered in the world of art that hasn't been done yet, or is it just revisiting things that have been done, like as far as movements and styles?
Well, look, I mean, your son, my daughter, they have experiences we don't have. They're being raised in a different world than we're raised in, so the art that is going to manifest itself out of this younger generation is going to be just different.
Yeah.
So I mean, surely there's. I mean, I think sometimes you feel like, oh, there's nothing new, and but something will come up. I mean, there will be some mind blowing thing in the future. So I mean, I don't know, but yeah, I don't think we've ever reached an end game. I think that you know, because each generation just has such a different set of experiences that it can't help but be unique in some way.
In some way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, because it seems like I've heard hearing you talk earlier about experimenting with all these different techniques, different ways of applying paint. It seems like probably a lot of artists have done that. So
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, like, what could be done that hasn't been done? And so, I mean, I was looking at some stuff earlier by a painting, and they're like, oh, this is like Rothko, but he uses a different color palette. So
Right.
it's a lot of that kind of stuff, that's a very minor difference. I'm not saying the art's bad. It was really, I liked it. Actually,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
That's a minor variation on something which is already kind of established.
Yeah. Well, I do think that art always kind of comes out of art, yes. I mean, all artists have their influences, and, all artists that I know speak of art history and where their work comes out of. But, I would never say that it's all done already. Something's gonna come along that's gonna be a game changer in some way.
Uh-huh.
I don't know what it is.
You don't know what it is. With respect to canvases, what about like virtual stuff? Are you into the virtual art or virtual reality?
I'm into it. I don't do it, but there's some terrific work being done with virtual reality, and video was a really hot trend for a while, but there's still some terrific work being done with video. I mean, I don't think the medium matters. I mean, in the end, anything can work. I mean, in the end, it's really ultimately about this convergence of form, content, and if it works, it works.
Uh-huh.
I mean, I think artists are drawn to technology, but for a while, like when color printing became more accessible, like everyone was printing giant photographs.
Yeah.
Well, they weren't any better because they were big and colorful. I mean, some were good, some were terrible, right? I mean, or video, right? I mean, for a while, like every artist, whether they were a painter or a sculptor, they always had the little video on the side, and every gallery had like a video, and a lot of it was really terrible. But a lot of painting is really terrible. So it's just, I don't think the medium even matters. I refuse to engage in any kind of discussion of hierarchy of mediums.
Wow.
I think there's still painters around who don't trust photography, which is kind of absurd.
They don't trust it.
Well, I don't think it's real art or whatever.
Oh,
I think that discussion's been
Yeah, the question of what's real art is.
Yeah, it's kind of silly. It's a silly conversation.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean,
But does the question of what a real artist is that silly?
it's probably a little less silly, but probably pretty silly. I mean, who's the judge, right? I mean, an artist is, look, someone's making art, and they say they're making art, and they're making art. I mean, whether it's interesting or not is one thing, but
Yeah.
I don't think there's any way of going about it.
I know, like coming from my own background in philosophy, it was difficult to call myself a philosopher because that's a grandiose title.
Right.
A philosopher is like Socrates and Aristotle,
Sure.
Descartes. But then I came to just think, well, sort of like what you said, a philosopher is someone who has a PhD in philosophy and is doing philosophy.
Right.
So in that sense, yeah, I'm happy to call myself a philosopher. But there's still, I think, a lot of people still want to use terms like artist or philosopher in a very narrow way that means like, great at this or
Right.
extraordinarily talented or something like that.
Right.
Or someone, like you said, obsessed or driven in
Yeah.
a way that, it's not just a hobby or something like that. It's not something that's your day job.
Right. Well, there's the idea of like, Joseph Beuys would say that everybody's an artist. And I think what he was trying to say, like, there's room for creativity in all of our lives.
Right.
There's room for the intuitive in everybody's lives.
Right.
There's room for, even as philosopher, imagine, you might have a notion, and unlike science, you don't have to prove it, but you certainly have to make a case for it.
Yes,
Right? But that it might start with a kind of almost intuitive hunch or something just kind of, but then you got to do the hard work of manifesting that somehow. But I think, I think the idea that I don't think everybody's an artist, but I certainly think creative thinking, open-mindedness, exercising one's intuition, I think has a role in everybody's life, or should or could,
So it's a little bit of a loaded question, especially given what you do for a living. Do you think art can be taught? Can you teach someone to be an artist, or is it something that they...
You can point them in the direction of it. You can influence them. I mean, but I do think that I know as someone who teaches young college students, my attitude is like if they're going to be an artist, they're going to be an artist.
Yeah.
If I can help them, if I can turn them on to things they don't know, if I can show them artists they don't know, and really spark their interest or send them, that's great. But I do think that for the most part, you're not going to make artists.
No.
You can probably unmake them. You can probably crush their, their dreams and visions. But I don't think you're not going to really make an artist. And I've had students that said, "Listen, never listen to your professors. Just do what you do.
Yeah.
Don't take it. Don't listen. Don't do what you do, and just don't listen to whatever whatever professor you have later." And I tell my students too, the most important thing for them, I think, is actually learning the history of what they're doing.
Right.
Technique is all important, but that's something they're going to just get from working in the studio, just working. You can teach them techniques, but that's not going to make what they do interesting.
Right. Exactly. A lot of some stuff that looks really technical can be really lifeless and not even interesting to look at.
I think sometimes musicians are like that, right?
Exactly.
They're technically they're great on the piano, but it's soulless.
Yeah, exactly.
And and there's a lot of artists who don't have the greatest technical skills, but they really are speaking something that's intense.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So there's tons of illustrators who do incredible illustrations, but they're kind of empty.
Right.
So
right. That's interesting because my mom's an artist. I grew up around a lot of art, but she was a self-taught artist.
Right.
And she really adamantly refused to ever be taught.
Yeah.
Because I don't believe her, but I'm interested in sort of what your reaction to this might be. So her view was, if you study with someone, then you paint like them, and it's no longer you.
Right.
So that her idea was that to really be true to herself, she had to do it herself.
Yeah.
Because anytime that she did something that someone else, look, here's a technique, or think about these colors, then it was their art you were making, not her own art. Right. What do you think about that?
I think it's a perfectly smart, rational, valid way to approach it. Art school is not going to make you necessarily an artist. And for a while there was like a real everyone there was like something like grad school. It was like grad school art. It kind of looked the same, right? It was involved with political ideas or postmodernist ideas or identity politics, and there was a lot of really silly work that was kind of the theory, was before the art. Let's say.
Yeah, exactly.
And also a lot of art professors, they have a vested interest in having their students do what they do.
Yeah,
because
right.
It sets up a hierarchy, right? And if you're kind of very well known as an artist doing a certain kind of appropriation, and all your students are doing it, so I think your mother's approach was actually probably really smart, and I think it's perfect. She's probably worked perfectly well for her.
Yeah, for her it worked good. The downside of it is that she doesn't have the network, what you get from going to school.
Well, there's a career, right? There's a career part of it. Certainly, almost every major college has an art department, art program, and there certainly is a careerism now in art that would have been frowned upon in the past. But it's just art is not separate from the culture at large. So now there's a kind of professionalism about it, and, but it doesn't make you any better or worse as an artist. Grad school or even any kind of school doesn't guarantee anything.
Right.
But for myself, I didn't really have any models or examples or artists that I knew at all. So studying art was a way for me to meet other artists. And I had some really, really terrific, influential professors who introduced me to artists who I probably wouldn't have come on.
In college or high school?
In college. Yeah, I had some great art professors who introduced me to ideas that changed my life, really.
You were already interested in art, though.
I was interested in art because I could draw really well. I could draw, and I had this desire to make things, but I didn't have any kind of sophisticated idea about what art was, or I didn't know a lot about the history of art or things things like that. So
Right.
that really.
Did you ever picture art as a career? Or
Not until I was older.
No.
You know, I didn't even like. Again, I didn't have any like. I didn't have any role models. I didn't know any other artists really. So, you know, I think when I first went to college, I majored in education, thinking I would be a teacher or something, but that was a terrible idea.
You're a teacher. What are you talking about?
It's a little different. I mean, I also like, you know, getting like a teacher certificate. And then I thought I would do commercial art, but I was just like, I was never really good at it because I wasn't good at delivering for clients per se.
Yeah.
Like, I wasn't good at like, I don't know, I just didn't. So, you know, I finally had a professor who said to me, look, why don't you just do what you really want to do? Just major in art.
Wow.
And I was like, oh, yeah, okay. Yeah. So even though I had lots of advice, I mean, what kind of career are you going to have? You're going to get a job. I mean, you know, everybody wants you to like, you know, major in plumbing.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, major in accounting. You know, and I did everything wrong. It's like, you know, yeah, okay. And I just was like, I didn't care. I was like, well, you know, I'm just going to do what I really, really want to do. And, you know, and that's it.
So what did your parents think when you said you wanted to go to art school?
I had very supportive parents.
You did?
Yeah, and I was basically, I mean, I think I had a little bit of help from my parents. I basically was paying for my own college.
Wow.
You know, and I was going to my local, you know, state college. So, you know, I had very supportive parents. And I was lucky to, at a very young age, be able to exhibit my work, and I got a little bit of, you know, minor notoriety down in Miami. So I was like, wow, the kid actually can do something. You know?
Uh-huh.
So I was doing stuff. So I was very fortunate. I had very supportive parents.
So why did you decide to move to New York? Was it for art or for other reasons?
For art, really. Yeah. I mean, Miami is a much bigger art scene than it used to be. But I just felt like I was in my early mid-20s, and I kind of had been able to show my work in Miami, and you know, had some minor regional success, and it was part of. I knew a lot of great artists down there, and I just really wanted to move to New York, and you know, I wanted to paint on the same block that Robert Frank lived on. And I wanted to paint
And you
on
have
the corner from you know, where Robert Rauschenberg had a studio, and I wanted to, you know, and I wanted to meet people who knew Adam Reinhardt, and I did.
Right.
So I just wanted to be part of that continuum.
Yeah, just like in other areas, there's a tremendous oral history in art, right?
Yeah.
So all the stories and the lore that's passed down.
And I just wanted to see firsthand. I mean, you know, when I was growing up, Miami didn't have museums to speak of, really. We didn't really get a lot of art. We had a little bit, but, you know, I wanted to move to New York, and I just wanted to completely steep myself in art. And not just contemporary art, but, you know, just the museums and the quality of shows. It's just, you know, it was where I wanted to be.
Do you still go to shows? Do you still go to museums?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
So you haven't lost that sense of excitement about being in New York?
Well, I mean, there's the city as a, you know, kind of corporate, super expensive flagship, dehumanizing,
Yes.
overpriced madhouse, you know, where like creative types are being marginalized because of the cost of living. There's that part, which
Yes.
I burned out on. But as far as just like, you know, being able to go to galleries and museums, you know, that part is still something I want to be close to.
No.
But yeah, a lot of artists are leaving the city because
They are.
It's just too expensive.
They're going to Jersey.
Yeah, they're going to Hudson Valley.
Oh,
you
yeah,
know,
Hudson Valley,
I mean,
yeah.
Hudson Valley, you know, it's got a whole other thing going on because,
Yeah.
you know, you just can't. I mean, even in the '90s, I had a studio on Lafayette Street, 2 doors from the public theater, that was totally affordable.
Wow.
And I lived on Mott Street. I
Wow.
still do. And you know, you would walk down the canal and buy your art supplies, and go to a lumber yard on Prince Street, or there was a lumber yard. You know, now it's all just gourmet chocolate shops and you know, super expensive restaurants and
Yeah.
multi-million-dollar condominiums. And unless you got a lot of money, you're not going to be. I mean, I know there's like a whole other scene way out in Bushwick and
Right.
Philadelphia, and now maybe out in Ridgewood, Queens, pretty soon. I mean. But it's just, the city is becoming very, very difficult. I mean, the city is great with cultural institutions,
Right.
and the commercial gallery scene is still healthy. But as far as like a young artist who has to make their way without having support,
This is probably not the place to be.
it's really, really difficult.
Right.
It's really difficult. So and you know, I considered it very expensive when I moved here in '89, but compared to now,
Yeah.
it's just insane.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Everybody makes people can make a good living and still can't afford to live in the city.
What do you think that's? I think I know your answer, but do you think that's bad for New York, for the city?
I think it makes the city kind of unlivable after a while. So, for instance, in my neighborhood, there's all these beautiful luxury condominium buildings, apartment complexes, and you walk by there on a weeknight, and there's no lights on because the people don't even live there.
Yeah, exactly.
The apartments go for $10 million, $15 million, $20 million, and it's just
they're holding out too until they get people paying cash, basically.
Yeah, I mean, they don't even live there,
so
it's not making a community. Or even my building, the apartments that are market rate, their turnovers all the time because they're paying well over $3,000 for a tiny studio.
Yeah.
Why are they going to stay?
Right.
So I think it's the city is becoming. There's tons of empty storefronts everywhere. So for me, like in my neighborhood, which is still a nice neighborhood, but all the little bodegas are gone. All the Korean delis are gone. The hardware stores are gone.
Yeah.
And you're left with CVS,
McDonald's,
bank branches.
Yeah, exactly.
Insanely pretentious coffee shops. I mean, it's fine, but it's not good for day-to-day living.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and because to bring this sort of back full circle, I know like in the 40s, with the abstract expressionism, that's kind of what put New York on the map as a city for great art, right?
Sure,
As an international place.
Right.
And it doesn't. I'm not sure if it's going to make, if it still is like a major center in the way that it used to be.
No, I don't think so at all. I mean, it's definitely one of the centers, but I mean, people are doing great work all over the world. New York is no longer the center anymore. I mean, I still think, again, in terms of cultural institutions, it's still really important.
What do you mean, like the Guggenheim and stuff like that?
Yeah, it's like the major museums, the PS1 or the Modern or the Guggenheim or the Whitney, name the museum.
No.
And even the smaller ones, the New Museum, the American Folk Art Museum, the Museum of the Moving Image, the Sculpture Center. There's a lot of great institutions, even smaller places like Participant, smaller nonprofit. They're doing great work.
Uh-huh.
But I don't think you can make the case that New York is the center of the art world at all. I don't think there is a center anymore.
Yeah.
Because it's just like, again, the global economy, right? I mean, art fairs are all over the world.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
yeah. So, I mean, to ask you some more questions about your own work, I know you have a big emphasis on viewing in person.
Right.
That you want people to miss out on something if they don't see it in person.
Right.
Why is that?
Well, I'm very much interested in the idea of kind of being present and conscious in the moment.
Uh-huh.
And I think that's something art can do, is just kind of root you in the present moment and to really get one to pay attention and look. So, sometimes my materials are a little elusive, right? So when I use flocking or when I use these really super flat matte paints.
Right, they don't show up well in the photograph.
Yeah, and so it's really meant to kind of physically seduce you.
Uh-huh.
I mean, it's not an original idea, but I mean, I do like this idea of creating something that is really meant to be looked at, and looked at over a period of time too. That kind of opens itself up to you over time,
Uh-huh.
and unveils itself to you over time. Something that's kind of open, very open, that you can just always kind of read into and feed into. So yeah, I very much like it, and I like the idea of living with a work of art. Just really something that you can just look at.
Right.
Every day.
Yeah, that's what you do with
without
it.
getting, I mean, as much as I love Andy Warhol, I mean, when you see the soup can, you kind of see the soup can.
Right.
And you can kind of move on.
Right.
And I think I'm interested in something that's a little more physically seductive in that way.
Right, because your stuff, there's so much going on, you always are drawn to some new element or a new way of arranging the things or something like that.
Right. And I like the fact that people see different things in the work. I want that. I want to engage the viewer, and I don't want to do it in a snarky way. Or I don't want to do it I want to do it in a very sincere way.
So this gets back to someone like you're influenced by Reinhardt, who says he doesn't want any unconscious in the art.
Right.
Nothing that's subtext. Or whatever.
Yeah, he pretty much had contempt for surrealism.
Yeah, that's too bad. I like surrealism, but.
Well, I do too. I mean, I don't.
But yes, he did. Yes.
I don't agree with everything he says, of course, but I mean, I certainly admire him as a singular figure in history of art.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So you want people to appreciate the physicality of the work, but also to be able to interact with it visually.
Yeah. I mean, for me, that when I can combine this kind of this what I call looking as opposed to reading, right? So there's like the kind of semiotician, semiotic way of looking at work where you kind of read the work of art, but then there's this kind of like looking, almost like the experience of looking in nature. But anyway, when I for me, like going to seeing a great work of art that combines this kind of ravishing, not even ravishing, but this kind of pleasure of beauty and the intellect simultaneously, that to me is a very exciting experience.
Right.
When I had this kind of, where there's this kind of intellectual, or this intellectually stimulating experience, but also this kind of like physical experience. That to me is like, so like if I'm going to the Met, and you just encounter something, it's like, I don't know, an artist like Corot could do that, or even a painter like Sargent, the portrait painter, or Thomas Eakins, or I could go on. But I mean, that when you're intellectually engaged at a deep level, but also just physically engaged, that to me is a very...
It's difficult to do.
It is difficult to do, it's not easy to do.
That's what makes a great artist.
Yeah.
Do you like your art? Would you like to look? I mean, I know you make it, so you must like it. But do you like? Some people don't like to look at their stuff.
Yeah, there's usually like an immediate feeling of gratification when I like something, and then there's almost a counter immediate being really critical of it and pushing it away. But then sometimes I go back and I look at things I did years ago. I'm like, oh, that was actually really good. So because you're always trying to push the work.
Yeah.
Right, you're always trying to challenge yourself and push it, even if it might be in tiny increments. But so there's always this like push. But I did learn a long time ago that I couldn't like fight myself. I couldn't. There was no point in rejecting myself and just becoming more comfortable in just doing what I like to do, and hopefully other people will like it as well. But yeah, I mean, usually when I finish a piece that I'm happy with, there's an immediate feeling of gratification, accomplishment. But then I almost start rejecting it right after that because I want to push forward to the next piece.
Right,
Exactly. I'm not. If it's easy, I like to have like. There's always like one foot in the known and hopefully one foot in the unknown. So you have to be on edge because if you're just cranking it out, they lose something. There has to be some kind of tension in there. There has to be something that you're not really quite sure if it's going to work or not.
So you have to be inspired to create your piece, or do you have a schedule? You're like, I got to paint today, or is it?
Yeah, I don't really think about inspiration too much. I often get inspired when I'm looking at art, like if I go to a museum show. But then to me, like if you wait to be inspired, you're not going to get much.
You're not going to get much done.
Yeah, I mean, it's a line that's been used many, many times. That I tell my students, inspirations for amateurs. That you really, it's about work. I mean, there's days you work and you don't feel like it. There's days that are really great, there's days that aren't so great, but I think I do like this kind of like, Joe lunch pail. You get up in the morning, you go to work. No, you just like, like I do like this, like you get up and, I do think a lot of artists identify as workers. You're working, it's work. Even if you have all studio assistants and you're orchestrating this large enterprise,
right.
I do think that
it's a job.
It's a job, but it certainly is like it's work. It's often physical work.
Yeah.
Even painting is a rather physical activity.
Absolutely.
So.
And your work is very meticulous.
At times, it's very meticulous. Yeah. So there's
very focused.
Right. And there's nothing inspiring about painting in this area very perfectly. That's not. It's like, oh, I have to do another coat. So I got sanded down. I mean, there's. So it's just work. It's just work.
So you try to keep to a schedule.
I try to keep to a schedule. Yeah, I try to keep really disciplined.
How many hours do you spend on one particular piece?
It's hard to say. It could be 40, 50, 60.
Wow.
It's hard to say.
Yeah.
I mean, half of that might just be staring at it.
Yeah.
But I tend to take a couple weeks per canvas. I mean, depending on my schedule. But I'm pretty disciplined about it.
What's your feeling about framing your work?
I like framing the work. I mean, yeah, I think it's kind of sets it off really nicely. I like framing it, color coordinating the framing a little bit. I mean, I'm kind of, it's not something that's super critical to the work, but I do like framing the work, whether it's framed paper or, I've made some frames for the canvases. I do. I like to frame even more of it and really, paint the frames to kind of work with the paintings, and it sets them off really nicely. So yeah, but of course, not framing in the traditional like the frame is a window that you're looking through into this other world.
Yeah,
not that kind of framing.
But this kind of goes with the idea of the expressionist that you use the whole canvas and there's no center.
Right,
it's the whole thing that matters.
Right.
So you're extending that to the frame even. So.
Yeah, and they wouldn't frame it because they don't want to hem it in, let's say, and they're getting away from that picture element. The painting was the thing itself; it wasn't a picture or rooted in anything else. So, so my approach to framing is not rooted in any kind of concept about painting as much as it is. But framing can also really set it off as a real commodity, right? So, like, if you're using like beautiful black walnut framing, right? And that the framing costs $8,000 to frame it, right? I mean, so there is something about framing that introduces a kind of almost a fetishizing of commodity or commodification of the work.
Right.
And a lot of framing does that.
Right.
So, artists who are doing pretty well, and they start doing really, really well, suddenly like things are framed incredibly well.
Right.
Because before, I'm not going to spend $5,000.
It's expensive.
Having framed walls. Yeah, I mean, you get a large canvas framed in beautiful wood, beautiful hardware. It's a lot of money. Yeah. But if you're paying six figures for that painting, then the frame kind of makes sense.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. So I mean, framing it's a big thing. It's
a big thing. But you're not someone who's against it. 'Cause I know so like.
I think framing can be beautiful. I mean, look, it could be a comment on the work of art. It could just be a frame, right?
Yeah.
Just to set it off. It could be, again, it could be almost like a signifier of status and modification of the work, or it can also just be like a really good-looking frame.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but I don't think about framing in terms of any kind of deeper meaning other than just kind of sets the painting off.
I see. Okay.
And I don't really resist the idea of things being decorative too. I mean, I don't think decorative is a negative thing all the time.
Right.
I mean, there's like the kind of emptiness of something that's decorative, just decorative. But something that's decorative, you can take a great black work on paper by an artist like Richard Serra, and it can be very elegant and very decorative, despite all of the heavy content that's behind that work of art. So,
they're not necessarily in conflict.
No, yeah. I don't think about framing and being, I'm not trying to make a comment on anything if I frame a painting.
I see. Okay. And some people get into it, so I'm just curious.
Oh, they do. I mean, look, if I put like this huge gold, super ornate gold frame on it, then it's clearly that would have an impact on the meaning of the work.
Right.
Right. But if you do kind of more of a neutral framing, it's not so much impacting the meaning as much as kind of maybe setting it off or just kind of finishing the work off. So, because framing could be definitely, again, like a lot of artists use frames as part of the content of the work.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So, what are your future directions? Are you looking?
Well, I was using a kind of ribbon in the work for a while, like just regular gift wrapping ribbon, and stitching it into the canvas. And I'm starting to play with yarn now. I'm using yarn, and I'm stitching the yarn into the canvas. And I think for me, the ribbon was really out of desire to create these kind of pinstripes because I was having to paint drip, so I had these like pinstripes. So the ribbon became analogous to paint gestures. So I was like using curling ribbon, where you kind of take a scissor and it kind of would curl. So I'd have like these drips with these curling ribbon, and also the ribbon. I just like the kind of like superficiality of it and the kind of like dime store quality of it, and also this illusion to craft, and I don't know. So I liked, and even like wrapping, almost like a gift, and also, frankly, I don't know. I don't even know if I would really want to take the time to create any kind of more fleshed out idea behind it, other than just pure visual satisfaction and the satisfaction I get out of physically doing it. So I'm going to be using yarn more because the yarn is like fuzzy, like the flocking. So it's like you got the matte quality, the super flat matte paint, and the matte velvet of the flocking, and then the kind of fuzzy quality of. And I would use like the cheapest yarn. I wouldn't use like hand dyed wool, from like beet juice or whatever. You know what I mean?
That sounds like nice yarn.
No, it is nice yarn, but I'm not trying to make I have some friends who make beautiful wool yarn and stuff like that, but I'm just, and again, it's something that's like, I don't even think I can explain it. And I think to explain it would be kind of boring, or I don't want to make it out of this like all this heavy meaning behind it, but I like the idea of like stitching into the canvas with the yarn and using the ribbon and using it as analogous to what's happening with the paint. And so this is another visual element. I'll let someone else come up with some kind of.
So yarn, okay, wow, that's very interesting.
Yeah, I was using ribbon for a while, and then
I've seen some with the ribbon.
Yeah, and then I'm gonna start. I'm doing a piece right now. I'm gonna maybe even today, later, like start using this yarn.
So you paint the canvas first and then put the yarn in?
Yeah, and then I might paint.
So you're like sew it in there?
Yeah, I stitch it like literally like stitch it into the canvas.
Wow.
Yeah, I did a big needle, like a needle and thread.
Okay.
Stitched,
So when these are curated 100 years from now, and someone has to retouch them, it's going to be a lot of work.
Yes. So some restorers will be busy at work.
Yeah, exactly.
Where do we get that pink yarn from Walmart? Where do you get this? I use like the cheapest yarn.
Walmart yarn. Okay.
Yeah, Walmart.
Very exciting stuff.
Well, yeah, I love going to like. I mean, again, I'm not the only artist who does this, but I do sometimes enjoy going through like craft stores because it's such a huge industry, right? Art is a big business,
As long as it's not Hobby Lobby.
Yeah, no Hobby Lobby. Yeah.
Let's not get distracted. But yes, anyway, it's fun to go to the craft store.
Yeah, just or even like baking supplies, spatulas and icing decorators and bowls and our hardware stores. All that stuff is kind of like, basically I pretty much do straight acrylic on canvas, but I've dabbled in all these different mediums.
Wow.
And there's certain meaning associated with all those things, but I'm not trying to do it. It's not like I have this idea like, I want to embrace kitsch and and female craft.
Right.
It's just more like out of a.
You like the fuzziness.
Yeah, it's like visually, physically, I'm drawn to it.
Very cool.
But knowing that it does have connotations.
Right. Yeah, you can't avoid them.
But sometimes a cigar is just a cigar.
Oh, hey, Freud, all right. Dr. Freud. What a quack. I don't want to keep you here forever, and so I'm wondering if, before we go, is there anything that hasn't come up that you want to talk about?
Anything that hasn't come up I want to talk about?
The answer can be no.
Yeah, I know. I can't think of anything. I'm better at responding, I guess, than coming up. But I will say, it's kind of interesting. I know you usually interview other philosophers and people involved in consciousness studies. So, I appreciate bringing artists onto this platform.
Thank you.
Because I think that, art seems to be able to relate to so many other fields, and certainly art and philosophy is a rich field, and obviously aesthetics and theory, and so I don't see a big gap between all these different fields, art and science, art and philosophy, and those types of things, But I do think art has the privilege of not having to prove anything, or it could just be completely nonsensical. Or
well, that was a hard-fought victory, though. I feel like that wasn't always the case.
No, it wasn't always. That's true.
Yeah.
That's right.
But now art can. But I thank you for saying that, because I do think that art and consciousness are related. I see art as an expression of consciousness. So that's why I think that people like you should be on these sorts of things. Absolutely, yeah. I do spend a lot of time with neuroscientists and philosophers, and they come at it from a very different point of view. But I think you're exploring consciousness just as much as any of these people are.
Yeah, I think so. And I'm definitely interested in kind of manifesting a certain form of consciousness, or what I like about is asserting the fact that making art, or this is worth my time.
Right.
It's a worthy pursuit.
Right.
In the pursuit of trying to be rooted in the moment, to actually kind of expand one's own consciousness outside of commodification or discourse, or just for its own sake. I think it's a worthy pursuit, and I think it's a pursuit that needs to be more than ever asserted as like, this is something that is worthy to do. Even if it doesn't, manifest itself in any kind of tangible way in the economy, it seems rather pointless. I mean, to me, the more pointless and absurd, the better. We're living in such, insane, absurd times.
Yes, exactly.
Not that I want to mirror or reflect that insanity, but I do want to resist it. And I do think the act of being an artist is like, it's my resistance of corporate culture. It's my resistance of, a kind of value system that has brought us the insanity we're experiencing today.
Yes.
Militarism, American empire, warmongering, all these things that we're kind of mired in that have become just kind of normalized.
Right.
So in a way, becoming an artist, to me, is a kind of, I don't make political art, and I'm not trying to say that just being an artist is political, but for my personal way of doing it, it is a form of resistance. I am not going to, work for bank heads and sell, useless, expensive products to unsuspecting people.
Right.
I'm not, I refuse to participate in, that's a whole other discussion, right? Because, when you get into but I do think that art can be subversive too,
Right.
Art has a subversive quality, so, and I think, and we all know too that, the corporate sector will embrace art for their own reasons, right? But I don't think, again, artists should not be ashamed of making money, and they should not be driven by some notion of purity, like, oh, I can't show at the Met because the Koch brothers.
Right.
I think that's, also kind of silly. But I think, most artists I know have made tremendous sacrifice to pursue their work.
Yes.
They're incredibly accomplished, and they might not get the material gains that other people get for being as accomplished in their fields.
Right.
So it's, to me, it's kind of it's a real thing to choose to do this versus other things I could have done.
Right.
I certainly didn't do it for the money.
You certainly didn't do it for the money.
Yeah.
No, I'm glad.
There's money to be made, and I've made money.
You've made some money.
I've made money. I know artists have made money, but a lot of those, but that's not. That comes and goes. That comes and goes.
Right, and that's what I think. That's a great attitude. Is the purism of a certain sort of artist who's, like you were saying, doesn't want their pieces to sell or doesn't want to go to places that are corporate.
Yeah.
That's kind of silly, right? Art's made to be enjoyed if the market will bear that. My mom's always going on and on about this. Not to get too into my own stuff, but she's always like, art should be affordable. I want to sell my art for $50 or $75.
Right.
It's like, that's fine, that's great.
That's
but
fine.
At the same time, that's not the only way to approach it. So I don't think there's anything wrong with a six-figure tag on a piece of art.
Right. And look, you pay for quality, right? And we do place monetary value on things that we hold in high esteem.
Yeah.
So there's a reason that, certain works of art sell for a lot of money. Sometimes the prices become so extreme.
Yeah, they're shabby.
There's no work of art is worth that amount of money, but it just shows you how much money people with money have.
Yeah, that's
it's not obviously that painting by an artist who's still in the mid-30s isn't worth $50 million.
Yeah.
But it just shows you how much money is out there, right?
Right.
And look, there's some very enlightened people who have a lot of money. And
it is kind of sad though when people buy it and then put it in a private collection in their basement. No one ever gets to see it.
Yeah.
I like it when they buy it and then it goes.
I just flip it. They buy it and then flip it immediately. And I remember talking to a very well-known artist friend of mine who was really shocked and disappointed when he realized in the beginning of his career that they weren't buying it to even look at it. They bought it and they put it in a storage warehouse for safekeeping, and they were going to flip it.
Yeah.
It was definitely that part of it. That's a big debate right now. Not a debate, but it's a big thing because there's artists who people who strictly view it as a commodity, and some people find it offensive.
Yeah. There's some, I can see why that could be somewhat offensive. I mean,
and it doesn't serve the artist well either.
Right.
Because if suddenly you're selling things at 6 figures, it's hard to maintain that.
Yeah. Right.
And if it slips, suddenly, the auction houses. I mean, it's a messy thing.
Yeah.
Artists are usually the ones with the least amount of power in those arrangements.
A bit odd. Yeah. Exactly.
So look, you're an artist, and you find a market for what you do, and you're making money doing what you love to do, and that's great. There's no shame in it. I don't think. This idea that artists somehow should be separate from the rest of the world.
Yeah. They
should be some kind of pure. That's some kind of I think that's for non-artists.
That's for yeah, exactly.
Like you've been romanticized. I've got work to do.
Exactly.
I've got to survive in this world. I don't have time to romanticize my own life.
Exactly.
There's no.
They want everyone to be Van Gogh, right?
Yeah, they want everybody starving and cutting off and being crazy. And
not having to be supported by their brother, and then they're famous later after they're dead.
Yeah, right. They want to be famous after they're dead. I mean, but most artists that I know, there's a lot of it's a lot to do. I mean, right? You have to live in the world, and you have to pay your rent and your mortgage, and maybe raise your kids, or you still have to survive.
Exactly. Right.
And I forgot who said it, but it's hard to write poetry when you're hungry.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? So the idea of the starving artist is like really not.
Makes bad art. Yeah.
I mean, look, there's examples we know those examples and there's a lot of artists who do go unrecognized for a big chunk of their lifetime.
Right.
But maybe they remove themselves from the art world, or they chose not to engage in it anymore. Whatever. But
because just like with anything, though, there is a certain element of you're the commodity in a sense, and you have to sell yourself. You have to be on the scene. You have to be always on, or have a certain persona. So I can see why people would get burned out really quickly on that aspect of it.
Yeah, there's a professional careerism that can be a little draining at times, and I think.
You think that's ramped up lately?
Yeah, probably more than maybe in the past, just because the art scene is so much bigger now. So
and there's so much money at stake. Do you think people realize how much money? I mean,
there's just so much money at stake, and and look, you have to engage the world, right? I mean, you have, no one's gonna discover you if you're alone in your bedroom working all the time, right? I mean, you have to engage the world, and if you choose not to engage the art world, that's fine.
Michael, the pure artist paints it and then burns it immediately.
Yeah, right.
They'll never be discovered. They don't want anyone to look at their art.
Yeah, I mean, I just think that artists should engage the world in the art world as they see fit, and I think it's perfectly legit. And look, I think there's a market for what many people do.
Yeah.
No matter how radical.
Right.
Luckily, there are people out there who appreciate. And there's a lot of people out there who support art. There's a lot of artists in residency programs, and there's a lot of goodwill towards artists out there. And I think that, but it can be competitive, and the art world is like high school.
Yeah.
It really is.
Everything's pretty much like high school.
That's
All worlds are like high school.
Yeah, I'm sure the philosophy world
is. It's pretty much exactly that.
Yeah. Well, people are people, right?
Exactly.
We've got our egos and our frailties and our superficial feelings, and
Exactly.
So the art world's no different than
there's no difference.
Anything else.
Yeah, it's true though. I mean, I tend to see philosophy as partially an art. I mean, it's not a visual art, obviously, but it's partially an art. It's conceptual art in some sense, and there's a lot of similarities between the two. I think.
Yeah, and I think the contemporary art world. I mean, outside of like some of the high-profile museums, it's almost like a subculture. The average public, the general public does not engage in contemporary art,
right?
Nor do they deeply engage in philosophy,
right? Exactly.
I mean, you stop the average person on the street, they probably couldn't name 3 living artists.
Yeah.
Nor could they probably name 3 living philosophers.
3? And keep hearing.
Yeah.
Oh, you mean living? Oh, right,
living.
O'Keeffe. Dead. Exactly. No, you're probably right. Yeah, exactly.
No, I mean, let's face it. Movies and now television are streaming. I mean, that's the dominant artistic medium of our time.
Right.
Music. people engage art as like, oh, it's so weird, or, oh, look at that, or
Right.
that's why I think sometimes museums fall into like the idea that they have to be entertaining.
Right.
They want to be entertaining.
Yeah.
They're scared to be like demanding, intellectually engaged, intellectually demanding. Or, I mean, some still they do good work. I'm saying there's a the idea that the public wants a spectacle.
Right.
So you want to be entertained.
Right.
So, and I think a lot of artists fall into the trap too, of like trying to compete with like Hollywood or something. So I'm perfectly fine with art being kind of a marginalized subculture.
Uh huh.
I don't know. But it's that gets into.
So you don't yearn for a day when art is like, visual art is like the movies or sports or something.
I don't think it's ever going to happen.
But you don't yearn for it.
No. There's some artists that engage the public in a really positive way. But most public art is usually pretty terrible. There's some good stuff, but there's artists who have become like Dale Ciccoli is like really, really popular with his glass stuff. Dale Ciccoli, he does glass sculpture. Certain artists that
I don't know sculpture stuff.
Yeah, he does. He's like a glass blower.
Okay.
He does these like big, tremendous outdoor things. I don't find most of it interesting at all, but there's certain artists that cross over into the popular.
Uh-huh.
Or like then you have the schlocky artists like Thomas Kincaid.
Yeah.
Bringer of Light.
Yeah.
Who did like really, but he died like this crazy drug addict, alcoholic, something like that.
Oh.
He should have made paintings about that.
Yeah, exactly.
That would be interesting. Not like a cabin with light in the back, and a waterfall, and the clouds. I mean, like how many visual cliches can he possibly show in one? And of course, with a Christian subtext.
Yeah, exactly.
Or maybe not even subtext, but over,
a dominant thing.
But the whole time he was like insane, alcoholic, abusing pills.
Wow, yeah, that's real. That's real.
I mean, that's what should be. That would have been interesting. So he's kind of crossed over to popular.
Yeah, I know. I wonder. I want to stop some people and ask them to name 3 living artists. I wonder if anyone could.
I don't think they could.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe
I think
if
they have better chance than 3 living philosophers.
You think so?
Yeah, I think so. Maybe.
I mean, I think they might. If they read papers and they watch, they might be able to think of like Jeff Koons, maybe artist Christo because he's done some big public things, or maybe I don't know. I don't know.
It's a good experiment.
Yeah.
So who are then? Let's end by asking who are 3 living artists that everyone should know.
Oh, that's a good question. 3 living artists everyone should know. Well, I could just name my good friends.
Yeah.
I won't do that. Okay. I don't know. I think that's a good question. 3 living artists everyone should know. Well,
you mentioned Koons already a couple of times. Maybe.
I mean, he's someone that's just so, honest. But for instance, I don't know. I can't answer that question because nobody should know anything. Because it's like a value to like, you should know this artist,
right?
I mean, certainly like the Adrian Piper exhibition at the Modern is a really intense show. She's actually a philosophy professor at Harvard.
Wow!
And she's got a PhD in philosophy, but she deals with her own race. Adrian Piper.
Oh,
she deals with her own race politics in a very intense way. That show is really amazing. It's a retrospective of her work, and I think that's, she's someone who engages politics and race from a strictly personal position in a very powerful way, and she's someone that I think should be looked at. And it's challenging work. It's not fun always.
Interesting.
And I don't know. I don't really know the name.
All right.
But but I think that, it's interesting because you see tourists going to museums, and I often wish I could like just stop a family and say, let me explain this to you.
Yeah, exactly.
Because I think I could do it in a way where you can bring them into it. I've told people many times, like if you go into a museum and you see a black cube, and it doesn't engage you, it doesn't mean you're not intelligent.
Right.
It doesn't mean, I can understand that there's a kind of almost it's like there's a kind of hostility
right.
in a lot of art. these
Yeah.
days. And I
To the viewer.
yeah,
Right.
and I could see, like, if you go to modern and you're looking at a painting by a contemporary artist, you're like, why that? Why is that here?
Right.
It's not obvious. If you-
Sometimes it's not.
unless you're really engaged in contemporary art, because it's
Right.
not there because it's it's done so amazingly well.
Right.
You can't believe it, right? It's not there because it's so it's there because it's saying something about the conditions now and the conditions of art now that unless you're really wrapped into it, you're not going to get it.
Right.
And that's not a measure of your intelligence. It's more a measure of your engagement with the field,
Right.
than anything else.
I think a lot of people do feel there's kind of association with art and intelligence. Like you have to sit there and be really profoundly engaged by it. And if you're not, then somehow you're not getting it.
Right.
And that's not always the case.
That's not the case at all. I
Yeah.
think a lot of it is like, I think it helps to be just kind of naturally intellectually curious.
Yes.
And be like, well, what's going on here? Why is this here? What's happening? And then the work can kind of open itself up to you a little bit. But for people to go to a museum and feel alienated by a lot of what they're seeing, I think it's perfectly expected.
Yeah, it's sort of what the artist wanted.
I think sometimes, and I think a lot of artists are hostile.
Yeah.
There is a lot of them, and they want to say F you to the mainstream culture.
Right.
And they are.
Yeah.
That's fine. But I don't think, very few artists are concerned with engaging the general public.
Right.
Because that usually ends up being something that's really watered down. Artists have done that. They've taken surveys. And what makes a good painting? I'm trying to do that.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
It's clowns on a bike.
Yeah, right. Oh, really? I think those are interesting questions. But, yeah.
But not the way to do good art.
It can be good, but it's not something that you want. I don't think you want to make art by consensus.
Right. It's got to be an expression of yourself. That's really the,
Yeah.
It's got to be something that's driving you to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In some ways.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for sitting down.
Pleasure,
It's
Richard.
been a great conversation.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Thank